All right, I remember telling you that on the port side, I had replaced a plank and I was able to get the seam work pretty tight. So it was pretty easy to caulk, and I did some pre-twisted cotton on the other side, and I also did a little bit of looping of the cotton in place. And now we're on the starboard side, but it's quite a bit different situation. The planking on the starboard side seems to have been sanded down quite a bit, so the planking's quite a bit thinner than it was on the other side. This is almost down to 3/8 of an inch thick, and the seam is good 1/4 of an inch wide, so I can't caulk it. I can't caulk it with pre-twisted cotton, and I can't caulk it by looping it in place, because what's going to happen is it's going to stick out the back of the seam. It's just too much cotton for to close that up for the thickness of the planking. And the other thing is if you tried to caulk it real hard, it would blow the back of the planking out. It's only cedar. You have to be very careful with a situation like this. So we've decided that we have to fill up most of the seam with a little batten that I just ripped on a table saw. Then I tapered the ends with a block plane. And what we're going to do is we're going to slip it into the seam like this. And one side of it's going to be glued to the plank above it, and the other side is going to be caulked with cotton. Now, I've decided to glue it to the top plank because when I caulk it, the cotton's hanging down like this, and it's very easy for me to caulk this side without getting it in the glue. And besides that, I'm really not going to caulk the whole length of it. I'm only going to caulk it or push the cotton in every couple inches just to push this up against the plank above it. Then when it's dry, when that glue is dry on that top of that seam, I'm just going to strip that cotton out of there, and that's going to be an extension of the plank. Then I'll whittle it down because it'll be hanging out a little bit, and then caulk it again in a traditional manner. And it'll look traditional, and it won't give you any trouble because the planks are able to swell and contract, and if somebody ever wanted to do any work on it again, they'd find that it's very much the way it was to begin with. All right, the first thing we're doing is mixing the glue up on a little pallet here. I like to mix it myself, and then once I've got it mixed, I just pick it up with that same putty knife, and I'm spreading it down this little batten, and I'm wiping down both sides so that what happens is it gets a little tiny pile right in the middle, as neat as I can make it, so that when I slip it in there, it doesn't push all the glue off one side. Now I've got just enough space to get the thing to go in there without wrecking that little pile that I've put down there. So then what I do is I just put it in position, put it into the seam, slide it in there with the pressure kind of down against the plank on the bottom. So again, I just don't wipe all the glue off of it. Once I get it in, I take a little bit of cotton and I push it in under the batten, and that forces the batten up against the seam on top. Then I get to the end of it here, and another little process, I put a razor knife blade in the seam, and that spans past where the end of the batten is, then push the cotton underneath that. Now that razor knife blade's got a little bit of beeswax on it, so when I pull the cotton out, I just grab that razor knife blade with a pair of vice grips, and it just goes bing, comes right out of there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off the glue off the top of the batten before I stop. Later on I pull the cotton out, whittle the batten down, and then caulk the seam as if it's a traditional seam, and it'll look like that and it will be like that.